Welcome. I should also start with the word OPA. Let's say with enthusiasm.
Everybody, OPA.
Right.
See, everybody who's Greek, and maybe if you're not of Greek heritage, you're already speaking Greek.
That's true. Actually, we were watching the video here. We finally, wonderful museum, love the museum. Elaine and I went through it. We spent most of our time in the Kalamos Great Hall. I'm just saying that for John's benefit. Okay. No, we went through the entire museum and we watched the video. And it was really interesting because the video says that Chicago, most Chicagoans, the one Greek word that they all know is OPA. So it's kind of interesting. It's probably because of the restaurant across the street, but you know, whatever. This is an interesting journey for us, and I'm gonna share our case. My name is Alex Pattakos in English. Pattakos is my family's name. It goes back to Crete. When you read the book, you'll learn a little bit more about that family, which I'm very proud of. But in many respects, my journey, which started out being born in Brooklyn, New York, at a time, this is where I really resonate with John, with your background. My father, who was Cretan, really wanted his first son. I was the oldest of my siblings. I think I had an older brother who died as an infant. My father wanted me to be really a good American. And he wanted me to fit into the melting pot. And so for a large part of my life, I was trying to compete with people whose names were much easier to pronounce, whose house didn't smell like my house during Easter and other times of the year, who ate regular American food and things like that. And that experience, in a large part, made me more estranged from the culture that we're all now embracing by being in this museum, and as we try to espouse in the book, because as I got older, it was really an opportunity for me to appreciate much more fully what I had been missing by trying to assimilate in the melting pot, which I, by the way, don't believe in a melting pot. All right, I believe that we're all kind of part of a mosaic, and if we can celebrate each other's culture and diversity, we'd be a heck of a lot better off. So, but a large part of my early years were really focused on being the good American, and I remember always being embarrassed when people couldn't pronounce my last name, and my last name actually is very short compared to a lot of Greek names, as you all know. But the idea is that I had to kind of be more resilient. It was almost like my mother named me Sue in order to make me stronger in terms of my character. But my journey personally, which we get into here in a little bit, that brought us to OPA was also a challenge for us, because Elaine and I, in doing this work, it was driven in large part by my desire to reconnect with my roots. My father died at an early age, so we didn't really get a chance to take him back to his homeland. And I really wanted to honor my father and my babu, my grandfather, and my everybody in my family. And so Elaine and I started spending more and more time in Greece. And partly because we were on our own quest, as we like to call it in the book. It's our own odyssey. All of us are on a personal odyssey. And so this odyssey for me brought me to Greece. But interestingly enough, it also brought me to Chicago, because I had spent a good part of my life, believe it or not, in Chicago years ago. I used to work for the State Department of Mental Health, and I used to work at Cook County Hospital, and I worked for the Woodlawn Organization on the South Side. I was a community organizer. For those of you who know what I'm talking about. And I spent a lot of time doing things. I went to school at John Marshall Law School right here in the Loop. Again, this is a long time ago. I'm going to date myself. I go back a long ways. And I got very involved in Illinois politics as well. So Chicago's always had a special place in my heart. And I also obviously remember Greektown. As a matter of fact, I remember the real Greektown. I remember hanging out at Diana's, the old Diana's, not Diana's OPA, all right, the first one, all right? And so this was really important to me. So to come here tonight means more to me. And we talk about meaning, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit after Elaine does, means a great deal to me. So, and seeing this museum, which this is the first time we've been here, but we watched the videos, we saw the construction kind of on the internet, and we just knew this was going to happen. And to me, this is kind of like all of you, and particularly I want to acknowledge John's support here, because it was so necessary. Although I will have to tell you that there are some Greeks, people of Greek heritage, who are upset that you call it the National Hellenic Museum. And I think people in New York are going to have to build the World Hellenic Museum, all right? Because you know how Greeks are, right? You know, they're all competitive and they all have to be the best and the strongest. And so I'm going to get into a little bit about the journey, what brought us into OPA, but I want to kind of pass it over now to Elaine, and then we'll go from there.
Kelly Spiros asks, I'm actually not of Greek heritage, so some people look at my name and it's Elaine, my name's Elaine Dundon, and they say, is that short for Dundonopolis or whatever? And I say, no, actually, I'm not of Greek heritage, but when I was 18, I had the pleasure of going to Greece, of course, with some girlfriends, knapsacks, you got the idea, and we traveled all around Greece, and I fell in love with Greece. I felt I was home, I felt it called to my spirit, called to my soul. I loved the people, I loved the food, I actually loved the philosophy. I started reading philosophy. And so I feel it was always destiny that I met Alex and married a Greek, and then married into the big fat Greek family. So I feel very blessed. So I feel that maybe if you believe in past lives or whatever, I was called to the Greek heritage. Also a little bit about my background. You know, we all, as Alex says, we all have our odysseys, which we'll talk about the odyssey of the book and how we got to today. But in my family background, when I was about 12, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so as a 12-year-old young girl, that really throws you for a loop. And really, you start to realize that life is so precious. And you start to look at the deeper side of life. And so I think that was definitely an experience that formed what I look for in life. I ignored part of that because I went into corporate world. You know, I did my career in corporate world. I went to brand management, Procter & Gamble, actually worked at Kraft and that sort of thing. And then Alex and I taught the first course on innovation management in North America back, I don't know, was that 15 years ago or so? And again, the Greek philosophy, we brought Greek philosophy into our classes on innovation because it had a lot to do with creative thinking, reframing your mind, looking for new ways of doing things. And so this Greek thing, you know, obviously married to Alex, but also the Greek philosophy, and that kept coming back into our lives. And so I look at my professional background that I did brand management and then innovation management, but where I really want to spend a lot of my time is bringing this whole concept of meaning, deeper meaning into your work and what it really means to work in the type of work that you do, and also the type of workplace that you want to work in. So that's sort of a little bit of my journey, but I think Alex wants to talk a little bit about the concept of Odyssey and then how we got to where our book, how we got to sit here on stage.
What is an Odyssey, Elaine?
An Odyssey. An Odyssey, well, we all, how many people know of Homer? Okay.
You're better.
Okay, that was a test there. An Odyssey is really a journey, and it could go back to Homer. And we look at Homer where he left Troy on his way back to Ithaca, and it took him about 10 years or so, and he had a lot of challenges. And so a lot of challenges where he had to be strong, courageous, and realize that life is not a straight line. And so when we look at the metaphor of our lives, obviously, think back in your Odyssey since you were born, life is not a straight line. And sometimes I think when we raise children, we sort of teach them, you know, grow up, go to university, get a good job, and get married, have children, retire, etc. And we sort of almost plan it out as a straight line, and it isn't. And so we really look at how do we rise up to handle all these challenges in our lives. So that's really what an Odyssey is, of looking at our lives as this long and winding road. And if you wanted to share about the long and winding road of the book.
Yeah, and it was a long and winding road. It still is, actually. And how did it start? I mean, Elaine and I, as she said, both of us have a passion for the human quest for meaning. And Elaine's work, obviously, because of her corporate background, she was looking specifically for deeper meaning in work. And how do you create meaningful workplaces? In my case, as I had mentioned, I had worked for the State Department of Mental Health here. I also worked in some other mental health capacities elsewhere. And I was blessed to have not just a passion for my own quest for meaning, and it's partly because being born in Brooklyn, New York, being of Cretan heritage, being stubborn, having stubborn parents and so forth, that, you know, that I was going to find my own meaning. And interestingly enough, over the course of my life, I was blessed with some great mentors. And one of my great mentors was a psychiatrist by the name of Viktor Frankl. Has anybody heard the name Frankl? Okay, so Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm still very close to the Frankl family, who live in Vienna, Austria. Dr. Frankl became my mentor, and part of the passion that I had for the search for meaning was determined by his system of logotherapy, his psychotherapy school, which is actually grounded in Greek philosophy and culture, which is, many people don't know that. As a matter of fact, even the term logotherapy, which Frankl refers to as health or therapy through meaning, actually has its deepest roots in the Greek word logos, which is, most of us know the word dialogue. It's the same root word of the word dialogue, but it also is the word, it has spiritual connotations, it's very deep. And so Viktor Frankl's purpose in life as an Orthodox Jew was not to promote religion, and particularly his form of religion, but if anything, to advance spirituality. He wanted to humanize psychotherapy and psychiatry as well as spiritualize it. But it didn't mean that he was trying to make it religious. And interestingly enough, Viktor Frankl at one point was a advisor to the Catholic Pope. So, which is pretty interesting for an Orthodox Jew to be an advisor to the Catholic Pope, wouldn't you say? Anyway, so having him endorse and basically bless my last book, which I'll put a plug in for it. It's called Prisoners of Our Thoughts. It's in 22 languages. There's a movie script being written actually now by a Greek-American filmmaker in Los Angeles that's inspired by the book. And that's one of the things that kind of drove me to try to figure out more about what is this search for meaning all about. And the interesting thing about the OPA Way is that when Elaine and I were spending time in Greece, prior to the current crisis and the crisis period, we started picking up things about, you know, this life. I mean, people were enjoying life. They were like connected in the villages. They were like helping each other. They were doing things. And then even when the crisis began, we would be in Syntagma Square, the center of Athens by the Parliament building, and there were all kinds of problems going on and so forth. And then one block away, we'd go have coffee with some of the protesters and sit down and talk about life and politics and so forth. I mean, I was thinking about this, and Elena would talk about this, and saying if we had the same kind of challenges in our country, in the U.S., we'd everybody be pulling out their guns and shooting each other. And, you know, I mean, it would be a very different world if austerity policies ever of that type, of that magnitude, would hit the United States or Canada or some of these other places. So we saw this philosophy of living that was deeply ingrained. And of course, at the same time, I'm trying to connect with my roots, which go back a long way. I mean, I was actually able to trace my family background all the way to the year 914. So that's, you know, I was pretty amazed. And this is without Ancestry.com. So this is just going to village, and talking to people. And the interesting thing was that we came up one day and we were at a taverna. We described a little bit about this in the book in terms of how it came about. And we've been studying philosophy, and Elaine will get into this a little bit on her side. We were studying metaphysics, we're looking back at ancient Greek history, we're talking to people in the villages, we're eating obviously the great food. You know, I mean, everybody, I have to make sure everybody knows this. The Mediterranean diet came from the Greek diet, which by the way came from the Cretan diet. All right, so I always got to make sure my relatives want to know. You'll realize it's a Cretan diet. It's a Cretan diet. It's not a Mediterranean diet. So anyway, so we spent all this time doing this. We said, how do we take this and bottle it in some way and bring it back to North America? How do we share this philosophy of living? Because even during the crisis, there were studies that we would be reading, surveys conducted of Northern Europeans who were complaining about the lazy Greeks. They didn't pay their taxes, they didn't do this. But guess what? Their most favorite place to have holidays was Greece. The same people that were critical of Greece. So we figured there's got to be something here. We don't want the Greeks to become German or Irish or French, all right? We want them to be embodied and embrace their culture and share it and be able to have people experience it together. And that's what we started to see. And so we wanted to bottle this. And so part of what the OPA Way was how do we can create a paradigm, a mental model that encapsulates the key elements of what this OPA, which we call OPA life, is all about. And that's what led to the idea of doing the book. Well, lo and behold, nobody really wanted a book that showed Greeks as role models. I mean, unless it was on MTV. That was a joke. Did I know what's going on with MTV? Okay, maybe I should tell you that. But there's a controversy right now about some TV show. It's kind of like Jersey Shore Greek style, and so the Greek community is not real happy about that. But I know Connie knows about that. She's leading the charge against it, I think. But the idea was we wanted to have Greeks be this inspirational role model, and wanted people to understand where did our way and quality of life come from, and the fact that many of us speak Greek in so much of our conversations without knowing it. There are so many words in our vocabulary, in English vocabulary, we have no idea where it comes from. And some of the words in our book, you will notice, we don't know today where they came from. And we had to describe their roots because we've changed their deeper meaning to something that doesn't even mean what we really were meant to mean when the word first was spoken. So the idea, we came in, we started looking, and then we had Greeks telling us, we can't do a book called OPA. Can't have OPA. Why? Well, the Germans won't like it. They think that the Greeks, all they want to do is party, they want to laugh, they want to dance, they want to have sex, they want to drink. You can't do OPA. Can you change it? And Elaine and I looked at each other. And of course, my family comes from the region of Crete called Sfakia. And if anybody knows anything, Google Sfakia. Sfakia is one of the few areas of Greece that was never occupied by foreign powers completely. They still carry guns and knives. So I just pulled out my gun and my knife and I said, Sfakia. You can tell how it has that kind of meaning, that sound. All right, so the idea was that no, we're not going to get rid of the word OPA. And as a matter of fact, we even took the word OPA and we created an acronym for it. And so, we're going to explain this. We started looking for publishers, and again, publishers said, no, you can't do that because, nobody wants Greeks to be role models. So it took us 4 years to get the book to where it is today. That's why it's important for everybody here, not only, we're going to give you an action plan afterwards, to not only read the book, understand it, we'll give you the final exam, but to share it with your family, your friends, and so forth. And if anything, I'm going to pass this over to Elaine now, this book is not intended for Greeks or people of Hellenic heritage. The book is intended for people who are not Greek. All right? There's a Greek person who may have heard the name, many of you heard the name, his name is Peter Economides. And Peter had done a video a couple years ago about rebranding Greece. His background was he was in advertising, he worked on some campaigns and so forth. And we're not talking about rebranding Greece with the OPA way. We're saying that the OPA way does rebrand Greece, okay? This is the idea of getting people to understand. It's almost like the OPA way is our version of the Trojan horse, okay? And people read it, and all of a sudden they start understanding, geez, that's kind of like my life. And I happen to be from China. Well, guess what? It's kind of like anybody watched the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's not, you don't have to be Greek to resonate with that message. That's what we're trying to get here. This is a universal set of principles, or core lessons as we call it. And we want people to read it, share it, live it, and be able to recognize that we can help elevate the human spirit, just like Viktor Frankl did when he was alive, just like he passed on to me, and just like we're trying to do together. So with that, let me give it to Elaine. She always laughs, but I'm also a recovering academic. I've been a professor for a long time, so I can talk for 16 weeks without stopping.
Easily the sun could be coming up right now, so thank you, Alex. Yeah, it's an interesting thing in psychology. There's a lot of research that says for every negative comment, there has to be 8 or 9 positive comments to offset that. And so when we take a look at, obviously if I, as a wife of Alex, if I criticize him once, then I have to say 8 or 9 nice things about Alex in order to get back. At least to get back into the good books. But why I want to reference that is, over the last few years, obviously it's tamed down a little bit, but when we were writing the book and shopping around to a lot of publishers, getting a lot of negative feedback about it's a bad time to bring out a book about Greece and that sort of thing. Could you pick change the title to something like Finding Meaning or something? And we said, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. And for us, it was really important that for all the criticism that the Greece and the Greeks were getting, that we had something positive out there. And when you take a look at, excuse me, all the news and all the negative, there wasn't that balancing 8 or 9 times to really offset a lot of the negative comments. And so we felt that it was really important that we carry on through our odyssey, all these challenges that we were going to get with this book and to bring out this book. And as Alex referenced, there's two levels that we look at the book on. The first one obviously is for Greeks, the target market of the Greeks, to be proud of the culture and proud of this history, and to remind younger Greeks of all this richness of the culture. But the second target group is non-Greeks, so that non-Greeks learn all the positive things and also can take a lot of the Greek philosophy, the culture, the mythology, and put it in today's context so that they know that it's relevant to their lives. So we had those two different target groups that we were looking at. So on our Odyssey, we had a bit of an Odyssey here where the first step is, there's a trigger, a catalyst. And both of us in our personal lives had those catalysts that we wanted to change a lot of what we were doing. We wanted, on our professional side, we wanted our work to mean more to us. We wanted to spend, as we're getting older, we wanted to spend more time working on things that really resonated with our soul, and to bring more meaning to people both in the workplace and in their personal lives. So we had a catalyst to change. And then obviously we're on this journey to carry on with the OPA message. So to me, a lot of times we talk about the financial crisis, and now it's not in the news as much, but I think it might come back again. So for us, it wasn't really a financial crisis. It's more of a crisis of meaning, that people are not connected with each other, that people are not knowing their purpose, that people are very stressed out, and that sort of thing. So to us, it was really important that we are philosophers of meaning, helping champion the meaning movement, but helping people find deeper meaning in their life and work. And so how they find that is going back to the roots of Greece and to all those great lessons that we share in the book. So do you want to talk about the definition of OPA?
Well, yeah, and we started talking about the OPA way about 7 years ago. And we started we were actually in different countries. And Elaine and I are very blessed because we have had, between her work in innovation and our work together in innovation management, and then my work with meaning and Dr. Frankel, and I'm also a political scientist, so I spent a lot of time in politics and working with government agencies around the world. So we already had kind of a base, to work with and work from. And it's interesting because when we started getting into meaning, both of us, as Elaine said, we've been kind of nicknamed now philosophers of meaning, and we're really pushing it. But we haven't always had everybody totally respect what that means, no pun intended, because I remember one time being in Athens with Elaine, and I was supposed to be interviewed on Athens International Radio. And we were going to talk about the search for meaning. And I remember the announcer, as soon as I got into the studio with him, the first thing he asked me, and it's just like, normally, thank God I know something about improv, because the first question was, do you think that violence is justified to overthrow the government? I mean, that was his first question. And here, we're going to talk about connecting meaningfully with others, and all these things that are about meaningful, engagement, so we can get peace and raise the human spirit. And he wanted to know whether or not, and so we ended up getting off in this side discussion about violence and whether violence was justified and all this other stuff. And so there's a lot of negativity, and I noticed even upstairs, it kind of saddens me a little bit to see the one exhibit of the graffiti and so forth, because I know that that's been going on, and I know that that's reality. But Elaine and I, unlike Jersey Shore's Greek Style, this MTV program, because when Elaine's talking about negative media, the negative media about Greece over the last 4, 5, 6 years has not just been mainstream media, it's been Greek media. I mean, it's very hard to find the Greeks, I used to be a columnist for the National Herald, and not that I want to point them out, but they're much more likely to say something negative than positive about, what's going on. And our purpose in life, now I got that on camera, I'm going to have all my colleagues at National Herald angry at me, but, our purpose in life is to point people to the light. It's not to get people we have enough darkness out there, we have enough negativity. So the definition of OPA,
There we go.
when we started, I told you I was academic here. There we go. We traced it back to Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and we spent a lot of time, reading and consulting with people about the ancient writings, the epic poem, and not only looking at Odysseus as a character, but also looking at where the root word OPA came from. And so in the ancient writings, we found that it had really two meanings. And the meaning of OPA in Greek, actually, because there are two O's in the Greek alphabet, omega, right, and omicron, that there's actually two different definitions of OPA, much like the yin and the yang in the Chinese symbol. And so the one, really the one sign that we derive back from Homer started with the letter Omicron, which is the one that we traditionally look at as celebration of life, enthusiasm. Because the English word enthusiasm, which we use to characterize that, really refers to manifesting the God within or the spirit within. So that's the one we talk about caffeine, we talk about dancing and breaking plates and burning saganaki across the street and so forth. It's all about the celebration of life and enthusiasm. But there's another side of OPA, which starts with the letter omega, the other O in Greek. And that omega is really about look out, be aware, increase your awareness, look out for danger, look out for opportunities along your path. So we saw the two sides of OPA in the ancient writings, all right, which was very fascinating to us. But then we said, well, we could write a little bit about that because that's philosophical, but what about something that would be in practical guidelines? And so we came up with the acronym O, P, and A in English, where the O was connect meaningfully with others. So the O in OPA, in our acronym, is others, all right? So that we found was incredibly fascinating. That's what I'm going to talk about here, for the primary thing, and then Elaine will talk about the P and the A. But the others part, we found three key components, which we call practices in the book. And we really want you to read the book. And you got to read the book before I can give you the final exam. So you got to read it cover to cover, not cover and cover, but cover to cover.
Got it.
Okay, got it. As the first one is hospitality. Now, how many of you know that Greeks are really well known for their hospitality? Okay. Unlike most cultures. I mean, you cannot go, to Greece and not feel it, smell it, live it, and so forth. And it goes back to the ancient mythology of Zeus, the king of the gods. All right? I mean, he was the god of hospitality too, among other things. Take care of strangers. It's amazing. And so when you think about hospitality in the Greek context, it goes way beyond anything else that we can imagine. And so we wanted people to understand hospitality. It's not going into McDonald's and saying, can I take your order? Okay? It's not like in some other cultures where as soon as you sit down, including probably here in Chicago, you go to a restaurant, you get the bill right away, as soon as after they take your order. In a Greek taverna, traditional restaurant, I mean, it's almost an offense to want to leave early. They want you to stay, to talk, to drink more, have some more dessert, have some ouzo, have some raki. They don't want you to leave. All right? And so this is part of it. It's that connection. And so hospitality in the Greek context, including hotels and other places, means a lot to the Greeks. And I think that Greek DNA has that hospitable kind of notion. So when you see it and you feel it in other cultures, they resonate with that. And then they recognize, they're not rushing you through. Get out, your table. I need your table for somebody else. Okay? So hospitality is one of the elements. We have a whole chapter on hospitality in the book. All right, we also talk about the village and the village concept, which really is unique also, not just to Greeks. Obviously, it's a village concept in the Mediterranean and other places, but how many of us who've been born and raised in the United States or Canada can say, where's your village? What village are you from? We don't. We don't even know what our hometown is, because we move around so damn much. All right? Well, I used to live here, and I lived there, and then I moved over here. And in Greece, even during the crisis, we found people go back to their village. It's almost like go back to the cocoon where we take care of each other and and so the village is a literal thing in Greece and the Mediterranean and other cultures, but it's also metaphorical. So how can we create more of a village in our businesses, in our workplaces? How do we create more of a village in our neighborhood? Because we use the word village loosely. It takes a village to raise a child. We all live in a global village, but we don't treat each other like villagers. I mean, Elaine and I work in companies where we've known people, and I was a full-time consultant, believe it or not, for Hewlett-Packard for several years. And I was a consultant, so I was there to, the consultant is, I tell them what to do, but I don't have to worry about what they do it or not, because they still get paid. And so I'm the consultant. So I'm working at Hewlett-Packard, and I remember being in some of these large, and it's not just HP, because I don't want to be down on HP, but I remember working in some of these big buildings where, a large floor with all these cubicles, hundreds of people. And people worked there for 20 years and didn't even know each other by their first name. Unbelievable. And I'm sure many of you have seen your body languages, no places like that. I mean, Elaine and I have walked into many organizations, including government agencies, large nonprofits, where it was like a scene from the movie The Sixth Sense. I see dead people. Okay? I mean, they come to work, They hang up their soul in the front door, and then they go work, and then they hope their real life happens after work. Thank God it's Friday, TGIF. So the idea is that, we wanted to figure out, how do you bring more of the village concept to the workplace? How do you get people to respect each other? And again, there are a lot of guidelines and different pathways within the book that describe that. And then the third key area under others, which is connect meaningfully with others, I promise Elaine, I'm giving it over to her, is a very important concept to the Greeks. And if it's not, it should be. And if it's not, I'm going to take care of you afterwards. It's honor. It's connecting with honor. All right, in Greek, there's a concept which most of you know, philotimo. And there was a recent video that went around the internet about philotimo. But the idea behind honor is critical. And so when you read the honor chapter, and we call it connect with honor, connect with hospitality, connect with the village, because we want to make it translated into something that people can relate to. We don't want to say, well, how much philotimo do you have? Do you believe in it? Most people would say, well, what is that? All right, because really, first of all, it's not a clear translation into English anyway, but we wanted to figure out, how do we take this complex concept of honor and put it into a contemporary context? And so when you think about honor, you think about things like when Elaine and I have been spending time in villages in Greece, and I remember, 1 o'clock in the morning taking a walk with Elaine, and one of the people we were staying with, they said, well, we want to take a walk, and he said, don't worry about it, you go down here to, this place, they're still having dinner, so go out outside. He said, don't worry about it, there's low crime here. And we asked him, what do you mean there's low crime here? Well, we don't really even have law enforcement to speak of, because if you look at them, what does that mean? Well, that means is that it would be dishonorable for somebody to rob somebody, or to face or destroy their property, or to steal some lady's purse. We don't need to have, police with military-grade weapons, all right? We don't need to do those kinds of things, because people will honor each other and honor their place, their sense of place and space. So that was an important concept for us. We figured, well, how do we do this? How do we take this notion of honor, honoring yourself, honoring Mother Earth, honoring the environment, honoring your coworkers, honoring your patients if you're a physician or a healthcare provider, honoring your students if you're a teacher. What does that mean? Honoring your teacher if you're students. How do we teach that? So that's what we've been doing with the OPA Way, and I'm only giving you like a very survey here of others. And Elaine's going to talk now about purpose and attitude, but we've taken these notions to different cultures around the world. And to us to be able to see, Chinese kids, for example, who don't speak English very well, and certainly don't speak Greek, to embrace this concept and be able to understand how maybe if they learned some of these things about connecting meaningfully with others, they wouldn't have the problem of bullying that we have in so many places, which not just in the US, by the way. And we wouldn't have some of the issues with depression and other forms of addictions and so forth. These are the kinds of issues that the O alone within the OPA Way can help in our world resolve. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to put out the light for everybody. It's not just for people who are Greek. Again, to reiterate, the primary audience for our target audience are people of not Greek heritage, because if they could embrace this and understand that they live it anyway, and they can live it just like everybody else, it would be just like everybody saying, my big fat Greek wedding, guess what? That's my family. Doesn't matter where you came from. Elaine, go ahead. I didn't get gonged off.
I just want to step back a minute and talk a little bit about, you've all seen this trend of happiness. So you see all these commercials and everyone says, let's be happy. And there's like, if you go into a bookstore and there's like a whole wall of books on happiness. So, and it's sort of an American thing to say, well, let's all just be happy. And for us, it's really interesting, because if you really take life at its core, you can't always be happy. Things happen, people get sick, you have a death in the family, you have a loss of a job, you have financial troubles, and that sort of thing. The answer can't just be, let's all just be happy. And so for us, it's really important that we do look for the deeper meaning in whatever happens in our life. So you can look for the big meaning of life, but what we really think is important is looking for the meaning in every moment of our life. And so even if we have a death in the family, looking at what's the meaning of life for that event or whatever, and what's the meaning of bringing our whole family together for the funeral, etc. So to us, it's really important that we start to look at this deeper meaning in life. And so that's when we learned so many great lessons on our travels in Greece, and then through the Greek philosophy and that sort of thing. we looked at how do we put this together, all these random thoughts, how do we put it all together? And that's where we came up with the others, purpose, and attitude. And that helped us sort of structure the book. But to us, it was also really important that we could help teach other people, because a lot of people say, well, how do I find deeper meaning in our life? And it seems like this big question. And so when we start to look at it, connect meaningfully with others, embrace or engage with deeper purpose, embrace life with attitude. So others, purpose, and attitude. So that's where we started. Then under each of those, then we had 3 lessons or 3 practices under each of those lessons. So Alex just talked about others, which is the village, hospitality, honor. Those are all about how do we really meaningfully connect with other people and not, on the job think it's just a transaction with somebody else on the job or in our families or with our friends. And so under purpose, engaging with deeper purpose, a lot of us can say, well, that's a big topic. How do I find my purpose in life? And to us, it was really looking at, what do we do to really connect? Purpose is really about connecting to the deeper person that we are, connecting to the real core essence of who we are. And so many times we so focus, and especially in North America versus in Greece, we found that in North America, we always translate that into what job do you have? So my purpose is my job, my title, my career, etc. Versus looking at who am I as a person. So it's not just about what you do in your life, it's what kind of person do you want to be. And that's where we got into so many layers of the Greek philosophy, talking about, as Alex said, character and honor and virtue and that sort of thing. So to us, the chapters under purpose were really about what kind of person do I want to be, and am I really connected to who I am? And that's where a lot of our stress comes in our lives, is that we're doing either activities or we're in relationships with people that we're really not connecting with, and that sort of thing, where it's really not connecting to the core essence of who I am. And so that's a big, obviously that's a big question, and it takes a lot of reflection and that sort of thing, but there's a lot of great exercises or topics and insights in the book that relate back to the Greek culture and the Greek philosophy that can teach us on who am I really at my core. Because when we get a closer connection to who I really am, to my spirit, then it helps us make our decisions in life. And we're not living our life for somebody else. We're really living according to who we really are. So that's about the purpose. I can go on and on with deeper insights into purpose, but I'll flip over to attitude. As I said, attitude is an interesting, embracing life with attitude, all of life with attitude. There is this big trend right now to all just let's be happy. And in the workplace, there's a lot of wellness programs on how do we have happy employees. And to us, it's really interesting. We know what they're trying to do. When a leadership brings somebody in to do happiness training, it's because there's a lot of research saying that 70% of workers in workplaces are disengaged. They're just not into it. They're just going through the motions, getting the paycheck, rolling their eyes. Their heart and soul isn't into the work. And we understand that obviously economically people take jobs because they need to make a living and support their families and to pay their mortgage, etc. But this happiness response we think is pretty superficial. And one of the lessons that we learned in Greece was they're going through a lot more chaos than a lot of us are doing in our lives here in North America. But they seem to embrace life with attitude, all the ups and the downs. Here, I feel, and I also look, because I've worked a lot in the corporate world, it's a lot about control. And we try to control things, and some people are like that in their personal life, where they want to control everything, their to-do list, and control all the people and how they connect. Whereas in Greece, I kept hearing the expression, ine te ine. It is what it is. Sort of like shrug, okay, well that happened, let's carry on. And to me, it was a sort of a different approach toward life than I was seeing over here. So the attitude was really embracing all of life with attitude, embracing the fullness of life, expressing our feelings. A lot of times, we wrote about this in the book too, about the difference in some cultural aspects of not holding back what you really feel and what you're really thinking. In some cultures, it's not polite to say something, whereas sometimes in the Greek culture, it was, if you're not talking, what's wrong with you? Why don't you have an attitude? Whereas some other cultures are saying, don't express that, that'll just open a whole can of worms. And so it's sort of which way to go, but I think a lot of people that hold back their expressions and hold back their real feelings, that's where we get some illness in our bodies, because we're stuffing all that stress into our joints and our muscles and everything, and that's where we're getting a lot of illness in our area, in our country, because we're not expressing ourselves. We're getting a lot of ulcers and everything like that, and maybe that is a root of a lot of illness.
I'm getting an ulcer. Can I express myself for a second?
No, I'm just in the middle of A. This is where, okay, so go ahead, Alex.
Well, there are different environments, and I totally agree, and that is one of the things. I mean, anybody who spent time in Greece, I mean, you know they're loud. This is not a silent culture. I remember Elaine telling me the first time that she went to Greece, many years ago before we met. She was staying at somebody's house or whatever, bed and breakfast equivalent. And the next morning, she was asked something about how the night was, and she was saying, well, I heard the neighbors yelling at each other. They basically were saying, they were just having a family conversation, and that's the way I grew up in my house, and Elaine knows this, that we happen to get louder and louder to prove our point, right? And that's kind of a part of this way we learn, I guess, or maybe it's in our DNA. But different cultures have different ways, and years ago when we were starting the Open Way Odyssey, I remember we were in the island of Santorini, and it was the first time, because we had been telling people around Greece, particularly people in the hotel tourism industry, do you get many Asians coming as tourists? And they would say, no, they don't want to come here to Greece. And again, this was a number of years ago. And then we were on Santorini this one time, and we started seeing these signs saying things like, my big Mandarin wedding. My big fat Mandarin wedding. And this is on a Greek island. And now all of a sudden we're seeing this incredible increase in Asian, particularly Chinese tourists to Greece. And part of the reason is that they respect the culture. They see a lot of the commonalities. They consider Greeks. And we've had people from as far away as Vietnam come to our place. We're based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We've had people from Vietnam, Tasmania, but in terms of Asia, come to our place in Santa Fe. And just be boasting as Asians of the fact that they love Greece, they love the Greek culture, they love the architecture, and then we had literally one person one time staying at our house who got his iPad out, and he was Skyping his family in Vietnam, and he made sure his wife went around his house with her iPad equivalent to show us all the Greek statues and statuettes and art that they had in their house in Vietnam. And it's partly this Asian-Greek connection that particularly, again, the Chinese and the Asian Pacific region feel that they own part of the world, right, in terms of world culture and history. And the Greeks do too. And so they're really proud to share this. And that's one of the things I think that was a very interesting thing, is to see that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because many of the same Asians, when they get to Greece, they let their hair down. When they're back in their countries, again, they're very formal, and again, as Elaine's saying, you got to be very respectful in a group. If you're a professor or teacher, or you're giving a speech, you can't ask questions because that might be showing a sign of disrespect. But when they get to Greece, boy, they're drinking ouzo just like everybody else, and they're still dancing and doing it all. So it's a very interesting thing to see that, and to see whether or not that cultural shift is an example. And this is what we have. We wrote about this in the book under purpose. Since Greeks started drama, theater, comedy, and all this other good stuff, wearing masks, right, is whether or not they're able to take their mask off and be more authentic when they're in that more open type of a culture. And it's just a really interesting thing for us to observe that, because once they do, we're all alike. It's amazing.
So A is about embrace life with attitude. And so we really have to ask ourselves, are we embracing life with attitude, or are we just going through the motions and trying to just keep our head above water or whatever? And so being around a lot of the villagers in Greece, I just realized they know the basics of life, but they just seem to be happy about what they're going about, connecting with other people in the day, and they still have all the struggles of financial blah, 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 but they just seem to have that zest of life. And that really, really made a mark on us. The other part of attitude, well, two other parts of attitude was, we also wrote about aphobia, which is being without fear. We know phobia is a Greek word. Agoraphobia. Does anyone know what agoraphobia means? It comes from agora, which is marketplace, so agoraphobia is fear of being in the marketplace. So many of these words that we've sprinkled throughout the book have these great Greek roots, but sometimes we forget that that's actually comes from the Greek language. The last part of the attitude I just wanted to bring up was about well-being. We all talk about the Greek diet. I think really the Mediterranean diet, I think the Greek diet should have a little bit more focus, and really in the whole marketing of Greece and that sort of thing. And when we look at Greece, when we talk about what's happening in Greece and how to market some of the products and services that are coming out of Greece, the whole area of well-being is such on trend. Everybody's really interested in their health, which is mental health, physical health. It's the whole I was going to say whole enchilada because I live in Santa Fe. I don't say whole enchilada, but that's not Greek. But anyway, the well-being part is really important, and to us, it's interesting that the word diet, came from the Greek dieta, but dieta meant lifestyle. It didn't mean diet, the food that we eat. And so that also kind of got away from the real true meaning of lifestyle. And when you take a look at lifestyle, it's about what we eat, and yes, it's about how we exercise, but what's more important is how do we connect with other people, how do we have purpose in our life, how do we have lower stress in our life, etc. So we talk about the whole OPA way lifestyle is really important, and so that's part of the attitude too. So do you want to sum up, and then we'll maybe have some questions?
Yeah. So what is all this OPA stuff? All right. I mean, we do want OPA to be a mantra for living, a mantra for working. And again, probably one of the most memorable and meaningful experiences that Elaine and I had with this was last year. We were in Hong Kong. This is just, for some reason, we always get to these places right before they'll go to hell. Because we were in Egypt right before the Arab Spring. You know, thank God we were there at that time. And then after that, now it's hard to go. So we were in Hong Kong now before all the issues, but
well, that doesn't. Hopefully, Chicago's can be fine.
That's true. Chicago will be fine. That's true. Anyway, but we were in Hong Kong, and we spent an entire week speaking and doing media interviews and so forth during a week that was called Radical Resilience Week, which is interesting because they were really focusing on resilience, because in Hong Kong there were a lot of issues with depression and teenage suicide and so forth. So as part of that week, we got a chance to go to different schools and talk to the young kids. And so we were at this one school, we had about 80 to 100 kids that were probably between maybe 9 to 14 years of age. And most of them were Chinese children. There were some expats there. And it was a private school. And of course the stress in Hong Kong, just like in the rest of China, on kids is amazing. Because you get one child, everybody wants their child to go to Harvard, MIT, or Princeton. And so they have before school programs, after school programs, then you got your dance lessons and your piano lessons. Because every kid has to be the best in order to get in. So we were with these kids, and this particular school had a lot of problems with depression, bullying, and so forth. And one of the problems they had was, just before we got there, one of the teachers, an assistant principal, had committed suicide. So here we are during this week where we have to deal with bullying, depression, and suicide issues when a teacher just committed suicide. So we're introducing the OPA way to these kids. And one of the kids, I'll never forget this because every time I think about this, it brings tears to my eyes, was a young girl who had the same condition as Stephen Hawking. And she was unable to speak. She had a person with her, an attendant, and she was in a wheelchair type, setup she punched in when she wanted to speak and so forth. And all these kids were basically learning about connecting meaningfully with others, engage with deeper purpose, and embrace all of life with attitude. And lo and behold, all right, at the end of the thing, we ask everybody, okay, so how do we spell OPA? So they go, all these kids, and again, their mother tongue, most of them were Chinese. O-P-A, but at the end of the thing, everybody said OPA. And this little girl in the front who couldn't speak, all right, is mouthing OPA. I mean, you want to talk about something that just pulls your heartstrings. So we knew we were onto something that these kids were thinking, and we go back to our hotel, and we still are very close to our colleagues and friends in Hong Kong, and we noticed we had made an impact because some of the kids started following us on Twitter. All right, now these are Chinese kids today who are following us on Twitter, and they're learning, and they're still always ending their messages OPA, or with love and OPA. All right, I mean, this is cross-cultural stuff, so it's very important that we mention this. Is that Georgia?
That is
Oh my
Georgia.
gosh! All right, okay. We're gonna talk. So anyway, so the idea behind the OPA Way is very meaningful to us. This is part of a mantra for living that we want to bring to the world because we think the world needs it. And so we want this idea to be something that we want you not only to read our book, we want you to buy copies for everybody in your family, all your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, give it to your boss, give it to the people you don't like, because then maybe they can connect meaningfully with you later. But the idea is to share the message, to live the OPA Way, to share the OPA Way. We'd love it if you go to our website, join the OPA Village. We have an online village. We also have a place, and I know Karen, a good friend from Chicago, also part-time in Santa Fe, knows about this, but we designed a place where we work with clients in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is an entire place. It's got 32 shades of brown because it's all New Mexican, right? But yet in our space, it's right colors. It's partly a Greek village ambiance and partly a ancient Greek temple. And so people who've never been to Greece will come to this little space and sit there. And actually, I think that our videographer, he just left the room. He's going to be meeting with us in a couple weeks in Santa Fe. So we'll get a chance to have him photograph it and show it to you here. But the idea is to share this message. This is something that the world needs. We need to go deeper. This idea of engaging with deeper purpose goes back to the ancients. This goes back to know thyself. This is not just, having to go back to Delphi. We're the oracles. You're meeting firsthand the oracles and philosophers of meaning today. Just think about this. You get a chance to go out to the world and tell everybody the importance of meaning in your life. Because it's not about, as Elaine said, the search for happiness. Even though I know it's in our Declaration of Independence, it should be the pursuit of meaning. And that's really the kind of the message we'd like you to follow up with. And make this kind of a personal commitment to not only read the book, be ready for the examination later, but to share it with others.
So I just want to say, because a lot of what we see is a lot of people wanting this happiness trend. And to us, we start to see that people are talking a lot more about deeper meaning in their lives and looking for deeper meaning in both their personal and in their work lives. So we know there's going to be other books out there that are going to talk about meaning. But what we think is really important is that people understand that there's so many lessons from the Greek culture and Greek philosophy that can help them, that we're ignoring some really basic understanding that was 2,000, 2,500 years ago. Socrates, Plato, Heraclitus had said some very, very wise things that can actually help us find that deeper meaning. So we're very happy because the book was just announced that it was a finalist in the USA Best Book Awards for self-help motivational. So why that's important to us, one is that's great to be recognized, but what's important to us is that is not a Greek organization, that is all cultures, all the masses, and so to us, that's really important that the message is getting out there. So we were really happy, and Alex and I are dedicated that this is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. So.
Yeah, Elaine just said something important because yes, it's got this recognition in the U.S. It also got an excellent review in one of the reviewers in the States in the New York Journal of Books. But we just found out, and I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag here prematurely because it's not official yet, but it will be official, is that a Greek edition of the OPA Way is going to be published. and the Greek edition, which means a lot because the Greek edition, remember, we started this Odyssey out where the Greeks said don't use the word OPA. All right, they're worried it was not serious enough. So it's going to be published by, and we're really honored by this because this is really a powerful thing, by a publisher, Estia. And if anybody who knows, it's the oldest, probably the most prestigious, Connie, you're familiar with them.
Yes.
It's probably the most recognized, prestigious publisher in Greece. It's been in existence since 1885. And so, I mean, to have that kind of recognition by the same country that was wondering, can we turn things around? All right, and feeling that they were always a victim is really an honor for us. And so that's just something that we're really proud of.
So on the count of 3, we want everyone to say OPA.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3.
Opa! Okay, now you go across the street and get some saganaki. Okay, now, are there any questions?
Any questions or comments, or did something resonate with you and remind you of something?
Well, when Alex was talking about others and connecting the idea of hospitality, I was thinking of the Greek word xenos, which means stranger or foreigner, but it also means guest.
That's right.
And I think it's the only language that has that one word that means both things. So the foreigner is our guest.
Exactly.
That's right.
And what's
That's right. That's hospitality.
And just to build on that, do you know what the root word of hospital is? It's from hospitality, which is interesting. When we go to our hospitals, do we feel like that's really hospital?
You're very hospitable.
Hospitable. No,
Healthcare
there's an
system.
interesting thing about, and then we're going to go all the way to Hippocrates and the wellness side. What about the attitude and the feelings we have when we're in the hospital versus the white walls? So I'm just saying that the Greek culture could do a lot for the healthcare system.
Well, the book, there's a character person they met in their travels, Gaia Maria, and there's this great passage about how she's in her home and she has so very little, so very, very spare and very spare, I guess, is the best way to get. She still hosts these people and feeds these people, and it's really a very sweet comment on the Greek culture and Greek village life, how you're nothing without others. And I thought that was really very nice.
And just to build on that, we do, it's in the others chapter about the village. We went for, it's some of the relatives of Alex's family, and we were welcomed in with all this food and so much love, and we felt like after having the lunch there, we felt so much love in this little room that was, not even the size of this room, probably half the size of this room, with all the table overflowing with food. And we laughed and we felt we'd never had so much love, whereas we've had lunch or dinner in these homes in North America that are, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square feet, and it wasn't the same feeling. And so that to us was really, really brought it home to what's important.
And it doesn't mean that we're anti-materialist or materialism, at all. I mean, it's basically appreciating what we do have more.
Right.
And putting it into its proper context, that we're not people. I mean, when we go to an American event or a Canadian event for that matter, the first thing they ask you is, what do you do? Right? When we're in Greece, where are you from? Who's your family? I mean, they want to get to know you, the person, and then later on they might find out, oh, that's what you do. You're right, or you're a teacher, or you work in advertising, whatever. But that doesn't become your badge of who you are. But that's not who you are. And so, I mean, these are the kinds of things, and if we can all learn that and learn how to, to get deeper into this, and it is a challenge for most of us. I mean, we know that that's, culturally, not everybody's going to resonate with the message completely, but if we can get them to take baby steps and just feel that they're living a little bit more authentically and a little more transparently, so that we can, because, in my book, Prisoners of Our Thoughts, the book was written, and the person who wrote the foreword to it was a guy by the name of, he's now passed on, Stephen Covey. Some of you may know the name. He wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he wrote really an excellent foreword to the book. And in the foreword he said, and basically it's about that diversity is the beginning of synergy. And it's an interesting concept, right? But you can't have that synergy if you don't have things like hospitality and honor and so forth. Because you have to honor each other. Honor yourself, obviously, because if you don't have respect for yourself, that's typically why we get into trouble. And then you honor others. And, as you're rightly pointing out, the uniqueness about the Greek notion of hospitality is it is about strangers. It's not just about family. I mean, even in, I know Lambros, you were talking about your village and so forth. You know, you go to Greece and you go to Crete, and Elaine and I have been to weddings and wedding receptions where it's not the family, it's not even your village, it's all the surrounding villages get invited. I mean, it's like, you know, it's an amazing concept, you know, so it's just hospitality, just something that is just, it's contagious. And that's the part that we're trying to get. You, Lambros is dying to say something.
I ended with donkeys too, not only with the.
Okay.
And the guy was playing the violin after the wedding, and having the village celebrate for 2 days.
Yes, exactly.
As you started speaking, as I've heard about this book from others,
Have you read it yet?
I have not read it yet.
Okay, you gotta write it.
It is-
Good review on Amazon.
I would do so. What I would keep evoking is The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but if so, what would you say the parallels are, and where do you think they differ dramatically?
Right. Where the parallels are, and where they differ somewhat with the Dalai Lama, particularly His Holiness. I'm totally familiar with his work, and I've read The Art of Happiness and The Art of Happiness Work, and so forth. And he's also quoted in Prisoners of Our Thoughts. Is that it's really, in some respects, semantics, because he really is talking about authentic happiness, which is different than a lot of the fluff that's out there right now. But where I think Viktor Frankl was influenced and where the Dalai Lama would resonate with is Viktor Frankl's very famous saying, and I wrote about it just recently, actually, in an article, is that true happiness cannot be pursued. In other words, there is no search for happiness. There's no pursuit of happiness. True happiness can only ensue, E-N-S-U-E, and it ensues from caring for something greater than yourself or caring for someone other than yourself. That's what Viktor Frankl learned the hard way, you know, when he was in the Nazi concentration camps. That's much more likely what the Dalai Lama means when he talks about happiness. He's not talking about happiness, let's go shop until we drop.
He's talking joy and meaning.
Exactly, and it's joy, exactly. And so in our book, when you get into the chapter there's a chapter in the section on purpose, we talk about engaging with another Greek term, it's a concept, it's called eudaimonia. And it's really, eudaimonia is a concept that incorporates and integrates inner prosperity with outer prosperity. All right, and so true happiness in that respect, which is really joy, because joy, the reason we chose joy in the subtitle is because joy is much deeper and it has a much different connotation. It's much more spiritual, whereas the way if you read The Happiness Project, and I know we know Gretchen Rubin and some of these other books that are out there, you know, happiness is like cleaning your closet out, making your house look nice and neat, and that's not what we're talking about. The Dalai Lama's not talking about that, and that's not what Viktor Frankl talked about. So it's really more about joy and meaning. And so when you think about OPA, the OPA formula is really a formula or an equation for finding joy and meaning. It's not necessarily, because you can't be happy all the time, right? I mean, the Dalai Lama is not happy that Tibet is in a situation it's been in for so long. All right, but he finds meaning in it, and he finds joy nonetheless. You know, you can't be happy that people are dying in our country and other countries, or ill or whatever, because suffering and these challenges are just part of human nature. But we can find meaning in every moment. Meaning always exists. Meaning is always there. Even Oprah, you know, even Oprah. If it was not Chicago.
Oprah.
All right, Oprah. Somebody actually did that. They actually said, "We want you to say Oprah." They go Oprah. But even Oprah, on one of her Starbucks cups, when they had Oprah's sayings on the cups, she has one that has, I kept it, because that was probably the one that was most important. She said, every moment in life has meaning. Or maybe it said, there's no moment in life that does not have meaning. So in other words, she recognizes that. But there are moments in life where we don't have happiness. You know what I mean? So, you know, so that's an important
And
concept.
if I can just add to this whole thing about unhappiness, I think it's actually a little bit dangerous that we set the target to be happy, because especially if you think of teenagers, if you say, well, you should be happy, then they get on Facebook and they see all these photos of a party that they weren't invited to. And then all of a sudden it sets these expectations up that they should always be happy. And when they're not, then they're depressed, and they're even more depressed because they think, oh, I have to pretend I'm happy. And so it's denying our basic humanity by saying you should always just be happy. There's always struggles. You can be positive. There's a difference here. Or you can be positive where you say, I can get through this challenge, like Odysseus. I'll get through these challenges, I can figure it out, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But just to say, let's all be happy, and especially I worry about teenagers of sort of setting this up, and then with Facebook and all this, it's so much pressure to look at, oh, everything's perfect. And that's when we start to have wearing these masks and not living authentically.
Yes, Connie?
Connie?
I'm just having a little bit of a hard time sort of reconciling certain things. I don't know if anybody else was born and raised in Greece here. You know, I was born and raised in Greece in a village, and sort of looking back, I can see the benefits of being sort of raised in an environment like that. I can see that it does give you a sense of belonging. You know, that house that belonged to your great grandparents will always be there and will always be known by that name. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. It's not a thing that is sort of is a feel good or a only a support thing. You have huge responsibilities, and you know your individuality in many ways. And I want your opinion on this. It's sort of, I don't want to say compromise, but first of all, you're part of this group, and what I have felt is that you didn't really think of what made you an individual, but how you kind of fit into this. And it's a very traditional Greek saying, what will people think? Because you're important. So you grow up with this, especially if you're a woman, and you know, your behavior, your attitude, your actions were very much determined by the norms that existed in this town. And there wasn't necessarily that much room to grow as an individual. So while I can see the benefits, I can also see the oppression that comes with it. And you know, and when you leave that town, or when you leave the family, you know, you're accustomed to this idea that everything you do reflects on you as much as it reflects on them. And you have this tremendous responsibility of saying, I can't do what I want to do because this will impact my father, the name of my family. So I can see the benefits in the sense that you have a sense of belonging. I remember when I first came to this country, and my mother bought me I was 14, and my mother bought me a beautiful dress. And I remember to this day that it didn't matter because no one was on the other side to see it that mattered to me. Where in the village, I would get to show it, and it would be, oh, what a beautiful dress. In the U.S., where I just got here, it just didn't matter that much. But the responsibility that comes with it, I don't know. Does it outweigh sometimes the benefits? Does it? And also, where does responsibility come in
Yeah.
of you know, the people in Greece and you know what's going on right now? I'm sort of convoluted in my not really being very clear. But well, you know, you have to pay your taxes, or you know, some things will not get done.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, are these ideas that you have, do you see them, they're from ancient Greece, but do you see them in Greece
Today.
today?
Right.
And do you sort of urge us to sort of live the way the modern Greeks are living now?
Yeah.
Which is quite different than when my father was living. And at my father's time, there was a great sense of duty and responsibility and sort of a ritualization of life. And it was a structure in Greek culture where you celebrate certain things, you go through certain motions that I think give structure to everyday life. But I don't see that so much.
Yeah.
And, you know, the party is over sometimes.
Yeah.
We've got to
Yeah, I mean, you're raising a very complicated, complex question, and it's something that's very real. And let me say a couple things, and I'll pass it over to Elaine, because I grew up the same way. I grew up very strict Greek Orthodox. I was in a very bad marriage. I was not able.
Not this one.
Not this one. I was not able to do anything about it until my father died, because there was no way that I was going to dishonor my father, nor did I want to admit to my father I made a mistake. Because that's how stubborn we were, that's the way we grew up. So I definitely can see that, that my calling, of trying to respect and honor my family was more important at that moment than my own personal needs to have freedom. But as Viktor Frankl said, as I wrote about in Prisons of Our Thoughts, and as we believe in this, in the OPA way, there can not be true freedom without responsibility. And that responsibility is both personal and collective. And admittedly, when you look at the OPA way, the OPA way is a paradigm. It's a new mental model. It's a new mental model that means it's basically saying is that we're taking attributes, some of which go back to ancient times, not just to the ancient Greeks, but to the ancient Minoan culture. Some of it is related to culture that is more contemporary. And we tried to put them together into some sort of a framework. But they're clearly ideal types. All right, just like you would if you're an organizational theorist. Max Weber, the German, had an ideal type of organization. All right. When people went and saw the movie or read the book Eat, Pray, Love, when they went to India, you don't talk about gang rapes. You don't talk about the caste system. You talk about things that are spiritually enlightening. So obviously, we can do the same thing with the Greek culture, just like you could with any others. You take the best attributes of the culture. You look at the United States of America. There are certain things that we are proud of, and there are other things that we're not that proud of. So admittedly, to come up with a paradigm, a new mental model, we had to come up with the things that we thought really raised the consciousness and really raised the spirit of humanity. That's our goal. And so that's what it's about. So clearly there are things. I mean, my family comes from Crete. There are people in the villages of Crete that still do vendettas. All right? I don't believe in vendettas.
But I think that introduction, that statement you just made,
Yeah.
I think that's a very important statement to make when you're presenting.
Yeah.
Just because it puts everything into context
Right.
and it kind of, clarifies for someone like
Yeah.
me, for instance, because
I mean, at my age, I would have thought that by the time we reached the year 2000, we'd be living in peace, world peace. We'd be all living like the Jetsons, flying around in high technology things and hovering over each other, and nobody would be hungry and blah, blah, blah. We're not. So we have a long way to go for humanity to truly be evolved the way that, many of us thought, would happen by now. So what we're trying to do is provide guidance and say, okay, rather than MTV's, show about Greeks, we're going to say, here's some things about Greek culture, Greek philosophy, Greek mythology that we can apply. And you think about it, some of it's so practical. I mean, when you think about some of the phrases we use in English on an everyday basis, like Achilles heel. Many people have no idea what that is. But yet we ask people, what's your Achilles heel? What's your organization's Achilles heel? We talk about Herculean task, we talk about Pandora's box. There's so many things that we use that are everyday phrases that can help enlighten people in terms of how they can live their life more fully and more authentically. And that's really all our goal is. And it just so happens if it helps to raise tourism in Greece, if it helps to increase the way that Greece is looked at by the rest of the world, we'd love that. But the real purpose is to improve the state of humanity. And that's a spiritual mission. It's not something, it's a mission. I mean, I'm in Chicago, I can say this. I'm on a mission from God. That's what this is about.
I hear you, Connie, and I think there are certain places in the book where we do address that, and so we're not all being, Pollyanna about everything's great. There's obviously, everybody has their own challenges in different areas. Everyone's going to find meaning by focusing on a specific area. But we do talk in the book about the difference, or I guess it's the balance between the role of the individual and the role of society, which is group and that sort of thing, and talking about where do we swing the pendulum. So at some points, there might be a group or society or community that puts so much focus on the conforming to the village, way of life, and not allowing individuals to express themselves. However, I think if we look at a lot of our American life, we've swung the pendulum so much to the individual. Just, what do you want within a family structure? What do you want at school? Let's let everybody have their own way. Let's have everybody have their own lunch. You decide, what lunch you want. It's not one way. In work, well, you make up your own rules. If you want to come in later, well, then that's okay. And then all of a sudden it's becoming this individual, and then the group structure falls apart. So I think there's this pendulum of where within a family and where within an organization and where within a society do you want to balance off this individual rights with the group rights? And I think that's a huge question of anybody's society and anybody's family too, of how much do you want to conform and how much you want to be an individual.
Yeah, I mean, our village concept, which we try to articulate in the book as clearly as we can, really is an ideal type village, obviously. I mean, and even though we've been to real villages, we spend a lot of time, and we pull out the characteristics that we really love. But I don't consider the perfect village in the United States to being a scene from the Truman Show either, right? And so there you got conformity. But we live where we live. I mean, nobody says hello to each other. I mean, we joke about it, because they'll come in, they close their garage door with the garage door opener, you never see them. So we have a total disconnect. We have people with thousands, hundreds of thousands of friends on Facebook, but they're not really have friends, they're lonely. And so the idea is that how do we find that point of balance that Elaine is talking about? And that's really kind of that's a moving target, but it's one that's worthy of us pursuing. That's the pursuit of meaning. Viktor Frankl once told me, I asked him, I said, what's the meaning of life? He said, the search for meaning. It's ongoing. We don't know. We don't even know after we're dead, where we are, in terms of next. I mean, unless some of you maybe had a death, came back after a near-death experience or something like that. But, so the idea is that it's the pursuit of meaning. Meaning is that life energy. And we're trying to figure out how do we raise the consciousness of the universe, if you will, so that we are respectful of each other. I mean, we write about this in the village. It's respecting each other. It's human dignity. It's respecting nature, Gaia. It's respecting, the environment. It's respecting, your coworkers, your family. And when we start losing that, that's what I'm afraid of, because I'm seeing a lot of younger people that don't have that level of respect that I had for my dad. I mean, and yeah, of course, I will admit, I was afraid of my dad. But, there's certain things that I will always tell you, and he's watching me right now. And I know he died too soon to go back to Crete. But I know that every time Elaine and I go back to Greece, he's with us. And that's what we're going to do. And I know that that's the kind of stuff. And if any of you watched Tina Fey and George Stephanopoulos on this recent PBS special, I mean, the pride these people have in their heritage. And it doesn't mean that other people don't have it, I mean, they have other heritages, but the point is, it is important. I think John made the comment, John Calamos, about, to us before we started, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been? And I think we're losing some of that. And the more that we can connect with each other in meaningful ways, boy, I tell you, that's a powerful energy. And where we see the benefit the most is when people light up. When I saw that girl, that little Chinese girl who follows us on Twitter, being able to utter, she mouths the word OPA, I knew that we were touching a hard chord, we were touching her spirit. And if we can do that together with other people, we won't be having groups, attacking us all the time.
So we're all on our journey, our odyssey of finding meaning, and for all of us, it's asking. For us, it's really, can the book and can our work and our discussions like this stimulate people to start asking the questions of what is really meaningful for me, what's meaningful for my relationship, what's meaningful for my family, what's meaningful for my work, etc. Then we're happy because we're happy. And we also find meaning in that because we're helping people ask those questions. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll probably finish off now and just do a little bingo with you. And
join the OPA movement.
OPA!